And good morning, everyone. We're so happy that you're here. Hopefully you all had a chance to go to our keynote this morning. Excellent presentation, and we just appreciate all of you attending this morning. I'm Joanna Schilling, a president at Cypress College, and I will introduce our presenters in a few minutes. First, what I'd like everyone to do, though, I know everybody is getting Zoom fatigue, and although we're not in Zoom this morning, it kind of feels like it. So at Cypress, what we're trying to do is to really focus on wellness, both of our students and our employees. So I just want to, since none of you are on camera, only we are, just take a moment, and I want you to all close your eyes. And we're just going to go through a quick breathing exercise just to refocus, just to get ready and be present for the presentation and to take everything in. So again, close your eyes, and I want you on the count of 3 to breathe in with your nose. 1, 2, 3. And breathe out on the count of 6 through your mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, do it one more time. Breathe in, 3, you can count to yourself. And breathe out on the count of 6, you can count for yourself. And we're gonna do it one more time. 1, 2, 3, breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, breathe out. Okay. Just a quick little breathing when you're going into your meetings really does make a difference, and I encourage you all to breathe. All right, so now let's get started. All right, I'd like to introduce our other panelists today. So again, I'm Joanna Schilling. Welcome, president at Cypress College. We also have presenting today Lisa Getchie, who is our Dean of Social Sciences and our Guided Pathways co-chair, and Ruth Gutierrez, who's a professor of English and also our professional development coordinator and Guided Pathways faculty co-chair. Thank you guys for being here. We also have Eileen Haddad. She is not in the picture, but she is incredibly invaluable to our team. She is our Director of Institutional Research who contributed the data to the slides, and she's going to be answering your chat if you have questions. So we really encourage all of you, since we aren't here together in the space, we ask that you use the chat function freely, and we will be answering as we're going on, probably not verbally. We'll save those to the end, but Eileen will be answering your questions in the chat function. All right, so what we're going to cover today is our objectives are really pretty simple, but the reorganizing of our institutions within a guided pathways framework is incredibly complicated. So we just want to share our journey with you of where we started and where we are now in grounding our guided pathways work in equity. So what you see here is our 4 core values. So at Cypress, our values are collegiality, integrity, excellence, and inclusiveness. And about a year ago, we decided that we would ground this in equity. Often equity gets put into the inclusiveness box, but it really is what everything must be grounded in. So we lead from our core values at Cypress College, and it is imperative that equity is at the center of all that we do. So now I just want to pause briefly and ask you to take a quick poll question. So the question is, does your college's guided pathways align with your equity goals? So let me bring this quiz up. So please take a minute. We're going to leave the quiz up for a few minutes, and if you can start answering in your, start answering in the chat. It works. We rehearsed this, but we didn't have participants, so we didn't know. So please take a quick minute. Thank you all for taking the poll question. We'll just leave it up for just a few more minutes. All right, so 18% of you are strongly agreeing that your guided pathways are aligned with your equity goals. That's great. 51% moderately agree, 26% are unsure, and 5% probably not. And that's, I think that is pretty consistent with what we are also seeing at our own college, and that was kind of an eye-opener when we started looking at the data to realize that we didn't ground our guided pathways as deeply as we needed to and wanted to. So I'm going to take this down. Thank you all for participating. Going back to our slides, I think. Here we go. So, all right, thank you, Ned. Okay. All right, so let me just take you now through, this is what we called Guided Pathways 1.0, and this is where we started. I'm just going to walk you through some of the things that we did to begin before we get to Guided Pathways 2.0. All right, so what we first started doing is we looked at our data. So you probably all remember when we went through the original workshops to get our Guided Pathways funding, the state prepared data for us, and we each received some key data to look at where we are. So this is what you're looking at is where Cypress was in 2015-16. This is our data from there. So Cypress's overall student population is 49% Latinx, 27% Asian, 19% white, and 5% Black African American. But when you look at these data, only 3% of our students earned 15 plus credits in the first term, and only 7% were completing college level English and math in 1 year. Ouch. So even worse were the inequitable outcomes that we saw. So our African American and Black students didn't even register on either metric, and only 1% of our Hispanic students took 15% or more, 15 or more credits. And none of our Latinx students or our African American students completed math and English in the first year. So we started by talking with our college about the guided pathways momentum points. So what you see up here is data from the 6-year cohort data in 2017. So you can see at the top for every 100 students and then all the way down to the bottom. So what you can see from this chart is that all of our students were progressing at relatively the same pace through the 30 credit mark. That's the third line there. But the completion rates really dropped off, especially for our African American and Latinx students, who were at 36% and 38% respectively. So this was really a call for action to us, but where to start? So I know this might be a little bit small, so I'm just going to highlight a few of the things here. So what we started doing is looking at all of the pillars, which is I'm sure what many of you were doing, and we looked at what we could actually do to affect the organizational changes at our college. So we focused first on the key structural changes. So to highlight just a few of these key items, we focused on creating better onboarding software using MyPath. We were on the front wave of developing Program Finder. Some of you may be using Program Finder, and if you aren't, we highly encourage it. This was developed in the Orange County region as part of Strong Workforce, and this is a software that actually resides at our high schools and allows students to integrate their high school programs with our college programs. So all of the Orange County community colleges are aligned with Program Finder, and it is a twin to Program Finder. Program Mapper. So we also implemented Program Mapper. Again, I'm sure many of you are also looking at or using this already. And this is a guided pathways instrument that helps students to see all the courses in their academic pathway. So we mapped 158 degrees and 72 certificates and identified 9 academic pathways or meta majors. and we started using Program Mapper last fall. We also aligned our dual enrollment program into a pathways program with students at each high school choosing pathways rather than random courses. They can do concurrent enrollment at our course, but it's not part at our college, but it is not part of dual enrollment. The dual enrollment programs at each high school are guided pathways programs. And we also refocused our Promise program by requiring all Promise students to take math and English in their first year with plenty of high-touch support. And we kept looking at making changes to address the initial data showing that our students were not achieving equitable outcomes. So let me show you what our current data is showing. So again, I hope that you can see this, so let me briefly go over it. So we moved from 3% of our students completing 15 plus units in the first term to 11% just in 2 years. Over 70% of our students still take less than 12 units per term, so we are working hard to create support systems for those students, such as free textbooks, resources for our students who are food and housing insecure, and now during the pandemic, free technology and emergency grants to help students take even one more course each semester. So this movement towards taking a full-time load is in large part due to the Promise program, which is really focused on support to keep our students on the path and succeed with a full-time load. Our Promise program has doubled in 3 years, and 30% of those students are achieving a 3.0 GPA or higher. You know, we had a lot of pushback at first, and people thinking that our students would not be as successful academically, but what we are finding is the opposite. The majority of our Promise students are Latinx, and they are achieving at very high rates, so we're very proud of the work that they're doing. Also showing progress are Black and African American students who went from 0% to 4% of taking 15 plus units in the first term, and our Latinx students who moved from 1% to 8%. So we expect this will continue to increase as our Promise program has doubled and almost tripled this past year. For students completing English and math in the first year, we're also showing promising progress, with students moving from 7% to 21% in 2 years. So that's our overall number, that we're at 7% 2 years ago and are now at 21% completing math and English in the first year. All students have made significant progress, but our African American students went from 0% to 9%, and Latinx students from 0% to 14% in that same period. So the impact of AB 705 is really driving a lot of this as well. So let me just share a little bit of data with you on AB 705. So our implementation went into effect last fall. And so in this first year, the completion of transfer level English and math within 1 year increased significantly. More specifically, the completion rate of transfer level English within 1 year increased from 46.5% in fall 2015 to 71.2% in fall 2019. And the completion rate of transfer level math within 1 year increased from 23.2% in fall 2015 to 43.3% in fall 2019. Although the equity gaps remain between white, African American, and Latinx students, in most cases, the relative gains of African American and Latinx students were larger than of white students, resulting in narrowing equity gaps in both English and math. In English, for example, the completion of transfer level was 1.6 times higher among African American students, increasing from 36.5% to 59.3%. And it was 1.7 times higher among Latinx students, increasing from 38.2% to 64.8%. So this is heartening progress, and although we still have much to achieve, we are very excited about this data, and it helps to support that we are on the right path. For our degree and certificate awards, like many of you, they have dramatically increased the past 2 years. Overall, we awarded 2,494 degrees and certificates in 2017 and 18, and 4,206 degrees in 2019-20. We're still awarding degrees, so that we do expect that to go up slightly. We also want to note that we serve a large ESL population, and our unique ESL certificate has driven many of the certificates provided to our large Southeast Asian, Vietnamese students, and our Latinx students, whose accomplishments often get overlooked. And finally, I want to show you the progress on the momentum points. So if you recall, we shared the earlier momentum points, and this is what it looks like today. So I'm just going to draw your attention to the bottom rung, which shows that our African American and Black students have increased from 36% to 50% completion in the last 3 years. Our Asian students have gone from 60% to 66% completion. Our Latinx students have gone from 38% to 42%, and our white students have gone from 42% to 54%, respectively. So what now? So the next portion will focus on our Guided Pathways 2.0 and how our focus has shifted again to focus even more on equitable gains. This next short video was recently created by our students to better communicate the guided pathways at Cypress College. And I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Getchie right after the video to share our latest progress.
Great, thank you, Joanna, and welcome everybody. Again, my name is Lisa Getchie, and I am going to share where we went at what we now call Guided Pathways 2.0. In Guided Pathways 1.0, as you could see, we started to really move the dial in some areas, and we closed 1.0 with that video because it's a nice depiction. As Dr. Schilling said, that was designed by students. So what we learned from that as that was put out there is that students are kind of getting it. Students are starting to understand what is this Guided Pathways things about and how does it affect me. But we also realized that even though we were moving the dial, we were at a little bit of a crossroads in our efforts, and that we had all of these things going on, but they were a little bit disjointed, and they were, as Dr. Schilling mentioned, not quite as centered in equity as we would want. We were talking about equity, certainly, but we weren't really grounding and centering our work in equity in ways that tied all of our efforts together. So we really did want to look at what is it going to mean for us to dig deeper, to substantially affect outcomes, and particularly for our minoritized student groups. So we regrouped a little bit, reorganized ourselves, and so when you look at our trajectory, we have a little bit of a shift in how we bring all these things together. And so again, we kind of affectionately refer to that as our second iteration, or Guided Pathways 2.0. And it really is centered in completion teams. They're at the core of our human resources, so to speak, but certainly not the only piece of the puzzle. One of the things that we wanted to do to bring together different areas of student service and instruction was to really be working in cross-functional teams so we could dig a little bit deeper. So this is our completion team model that you see here. Across the bottom are our academic pathways. You might recognize some of those abbreviations, CTE, obviously. Social sciences, I happen to be the Dean of Social Sciences, so you'll have to bear with me because a lot of my examples are social sciences. But each academic pathway has a completion team. And it's made up of a combination of student services folks and instructional faculty members. Right now, we have cross-functional teams that are made up of faculty peer coaches, faculty peer mentors and counselors, the division dean, classified staff, representatives from financial aid, the Learning Resource Center, the Transfer Center, the Career Center. All of these individuals that are serving on a team, which we'll describe later, are trained in equity. So the goal is for this team to come together and really look through their different professional lenses and look at things that are specific to that student group, specific to that academic pathway. And we'll share some examples with you later of what this looks like. But our goal was really to dive deeper into the specific academic pathway. It is worth noticing that, though it's not represented on this slide, once we launched this model, which was really during summer months, we now that our students are back, are actively seeking out students to also be part of these completion teams, because that's absolutely an important point as well. This next slide then gives us a visual of that centering in equity. So you can see right at the bottom, we center everything in equity, and our goal then to tie all of these activities together was to center all of it in equity. And if you look up through this middle column, you'll see the completion teams at the very top. But of course, completion teams are not working in a vacuum. We've also got, of all of our other stakeholder groups, our students are additional full-time and part-time faculty members, campus leadership, and classified staff. So our goal was really to work through equity training and to work with the completion teams as well as all of these other stakeholder groups to provide equity training in such a way that we were all working from the same lens, that we were all looking through that same equity lens, and then we could use that lens to branch out into the left to our programs and also to the right to our infrastructure, things like our website and our communications and our A&R and financial aid, and make sure that we were making adjustments in the programs and infrastructure that came through that faculty lens that we are all kind of coming to share. So we're going to focus primarily here on the centerpiece. What have we done to really center this work in equity, and then hopefully a little bit of how that has spilled over then into our greatest capital, our human resources, affecting changes within the programs and the infrastructure. And to do that, I'm going to turn it over to Ruth.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ruth Gutierrez, who just smacked me against her desk. And I am the Guided Pathways faculty co-chair. So my job today is to, go over with all of you, basically the roadmap we adopted to provide the groundwork that informs our completion team work. And all of this is based in equity. So in order to address issues of equity at the systemic and institutional levels, we identified 5 stakeholder groups who are critical in centering equity on our campus. Each stakeholder group will participate in equity training or are currently participating in equity training and workshops that will lay the foundation for campus-wide transformational change. The groups include, as you see, students, classified professionals, adjunct faculty, full-time faculty, and campus leadership. These stakeholder groups will acquire broad foundational understanding of equity-minded practices and frameworks, and through this learning, not only will they have this knowledge, they'll be able to apply these practices to their work. So what you should know off the bat is that this is a comprehensive plan. It is not something that is going to be completed in 1 year. It is going to be over time, and the plan will change as our needs change, and our needs, will change. So I'm going to go ahead and start with students because, there we go. Clearly, students are the most important stakeholder group in higher education. Their input and voice is critical to institutionalizing equity on campus, and it is really important that we empower students with tools and access to engage in the policymaking processes. Building community and student connectedness on campus is critical to student success. So although this slide begins with mental health support, I'm going to switch it up a little bit. I'm going to go rogue and begin with the student survey because I really want to address the idea of student voices. So the first thing that we're going to do, and it's a tool that is commonly used on campus, is our student climate surveys. But the climate survey we're using is intentional and focused on racial climate, on campus racial climate. So the survey was developed by the USC Race and Equity Center, and it provides a rigorous, expert-validated quantitative survey that measures belonging and inclusion, the frequency and depth of cross-cultural interactions, students' appraisals of institutional commitment to diversity and inclusion, and other related topics. The data from this survey will help campus administrators improve the racial climate and experiences for students on our campus. So although this is an important tool for students to provide input and help inform future policy decisions, it is not the only type of input we are asking for. So it is important to provide students with the tools to build their capacity to lead and make a difference on their campuses and communities. So what we have done is we've provided some equity training workshops for our students. So we reached out to some of our affinity groups, like our legacy program, Puente, Glade, Associated Students, and other groups to attend a youth summit sponsored by Speak Out. And we'll send about 50 Cypress College students to this youth summit, and they will participate in a day-long virtual summit on racial justice, leadership development, and radical imagination. Another possibility for students that attend this is that they will also be given the opportunity to participate in an e-course called Race, Power, and Privilege, also organized by Speak Out. It offers creative and relevant introductory curriculum that provides students with the fundamentals of how interpersonal and systemic racism function. And it helps students tap into their radical imagination and build their capacity to self-advocate. So students are also, we have a lot of things going on with students. Students are also a part of, we're working them hard, of a group effort working with faculty and staff in this e-convening series. They have one e-convening a month that focuses on some particular aspect of racial equity. So this group is made up of staff, faculty, students, and they go to these trainings and they learn about racial equity on campuses and how to share this learning with others. So like I said, we are providing quite a bit of opportunities of training for students, but the goal is that providing them with these trainings and information, this learning, is that allow us to see who really is leaning into this work, which students are actively involved and want to be actively involved in participating and creating change on campus. So we'll be recruiting leaders from these workshops and trainings, and these are the very students, as Lisa mentioned before, that would be part of our completion teams and other governance committees that'll help make decisions on campus. So we're really looking forward to working with that in that way with students. In the future, we are looking to have some more peer-to-peer training. So we have this peer mentoring model. The plan is right now a summer intensive training in equity-based practices where students train other students, which we think is a great way for students to really get involved in this process as well. We want them not only to be a part of the decision-making process, be a part of the teaching though as well. We also need to address students' immediate needs. So beyond the trainings and the workshops and the input that they are providing us on campus to create change here, we also need to support their immediate needs. And some of those immediate needs deal with mental health support, as Dr. Schilling mentioned before. For our students, we have created a series of Wellness Wednesdays where students will be given support in integrated wellness practices. They'll have resource materials, discussions, reflection on the importance of health, well-being, and lifestyle. So this is really important, especially at this time, with COVID-19, all the changes that are occurring in our world and on our campus. It's really critical that we provide them this support as well. So students, really important, obviously. Another group that is, a priority as well is our classified professionals. One of the challenges that we always face is, attempting to include classified professionals in trainings and providing them a space for input in the changes that occur on campus. And so this Caring Campus initiative gave us the vehicle to do so. We're really excited about it. So the Institute of Evidence-Based Change provides an evidence-based facilitated coaching model wherein IVBC coaches instruct professional staff on the fundamentals of what can be done to increase student connectedness to the cause to increase student success. So our classified professionals, about 25 who belong to this cohort, are actually identifying behavioral changes that they're going to make that'll help increase student connectedness and success on campus. How does this relate to equity-minded practices and overall student success? So, any obstacles to student success would be an equity issue. For example, I don't know if any of you participated on equity walks around campus. We have done a few both online and in person. And so, for example, one of the issues that we found was that we didn't have clear signage in some areas. So if a student doesn't know where to go, that is an obstacle to success because not being able to access the resources that they need to be successful on campus. So we have to change that and provide better signage. An example of the Caring Campus cohort is that some of them have committed to this type of warm handoff. So when a student comes to admissions and records looking for financial aid, they aren't simply told, we don't do that work here, you need to go to financial aid. They've committed to actually providing that warm handoff. Now, in person, that would mean they would walk that student over to financial aid and connect them with an actual person who can help them instead of just sending them off. In the virtual world, that would look more like, hold on, I'm going to call that person for you right now and connect you to that person in financial aid. And so it seems small, but they have a huge impact on whether or not students feel connected and supported on campus. So that is one way in which we are pulling in classified professionals to provide, to make some changes on campus as well that are equity-minded. All right. Then I'm going to go ahead and go to campus leadership. Obviously, campus leadership is very important. We need everybody in on this work. So campus leadership, that includes division deans, directors, academic senate, executive board, the president, and executive team are all participating. Actually, we just completed the Race and Equity Institute. This was an 8-week institute, 20 participants. The participants used research-based models to develop an actionable plan using evidence-based practices, and these projects focus on infrastructure change. Some of the topics include race-conscious leadership in higher education, reducing bias in the search and hiring process, relationships of power and reducing abuse of power in the workplace, strategic planning, and action for racial equity. So it was a pretty intense 8 weeks. I think everyone really felt like, this was valuable and want to continue that work and continue these discussions beyond the Institute itself. So we're really excited about that. We also have adjunct faculty. Adjunct faculty are also critical to center equity on this campus. They probably see more students than full-time faculty for sure. So it is important that we have them trained in the same learning that we're doing so that they can share that with their students as well. So adjunct faculty will participate in Adjunct Academy that focuses on equity-minded practices that support the overall goals and framework. This will be peer-to-peer coaching provided by full-time faculty, classified professionals, students, and campus leaderships. And they will be provided a stipend for attending these workshops as well. And then last but not least, we have full-time faculty. Full-time faculty, I know Lisa mentioned this earlier. We have identified 8 faculty peer and data coaches representing each division. They have all just completed an 8-week Equity Institute provided by the Race and Equity Center as well. The modules focus on teaching and literacy, assessment, and evaluation. Using a research-based model, just like the campus leadership group, they're developing an actionable project using evidence-based practices. So the faculty peer data coaches work with completion teams to develop a plan to support students based on their project goals. They also plan and facilitate division trainings and workshops providing peer-to-peer coaching. So in a nutshell, all of these groups are being provided equity training, equity-based training. Again, it's not enough to just know, okay, I know that this needs to have equity, or removing obstacles is, equity. You have to really understand what equity is all about. And with everything that we do, we need to use an equity lens. So Lisa, which is the most important part, Lisa is now going to provide us with some real examples, because we've given you all the things of what we've done so far, but now what does this look like, on campus, and what do these completion teams actually do? So I'm going to go ahead and turn that over to Lisa now.
All right, thank you. So this would be an example of the dashboards that we're using within our completion teams, and our data coaches in particular, but also our peer faculty coaches worked a lot with institutional research to develop these data tools that are really designed to uncover trends that could drive appropriate interventions for a particular student group. As you can see by the drop-down menus, this gives data coaches the opportunity and the skills to disaggregate. And that was really the most important, is how do we disaggregate information in ways that tell a story about particular student groups and those particular student groups within particular academic pathways, so that we could cater interventions appropriately. With those tools in hand, I want to give you a brief example. I told you I'm the social science dean in addition to my work on guided pathways. So this is my completion team. So I thought I'd share an example out of our division and out of our completion team. As you can see, we're able to disaggregate quite a bit, and I won't drill down into the specific data, but let me give you a quick example of how this ended up looking. One of the things within our completion team that we began to notice, for example, is that students in the social sciences, there's a lot of overlap, for example, between anthropology and ethnic studies, or sociology and psychology. And we noticed that one of our data trends, though, is that a lot of our students were taking, they had excessive units, which we see in a lot of our academic pathways, right? And it seemed that perhaps our hypothesis is that students were following particular instructors, right? So we are asking, where can we intervene there when a student is taking these extra classes because they like an instructor, and either redirect them or have a conversation about changing their major, right? If that's a less deficit model, right? To say, well, wait a minute, if you like this so much, maybe you belong in this major. Where can we intervene? And again, that might not be applicable to all of our academic pathways, but was certainly true for us. So that's why it was nice to be able to disaggregate the data and then look at our particular student groups. Another really quick example would be that social sciences is heavy even pre-COVID in distance education. And so some of our success rate gaps were below the college average. And when we started disaggregating that and looking at how particular student groups were doing in distance education, we really needed to look at equity practices and culturally relevant pedagogy, particularly in online courses. So just a quick example of application of some of that data use.
Okay, so our time is running, so I'm going to go quickly over how these groups all work together. Obviously, first on completion teams, we've also organized an equity retreat this November, where all these stakeholder groups will help to create an equity framework. Well, that will help drive future planning. We also are going to put all these groups together over the summer to do some planning for the next year. They're going to do some reflection, evaluation of equity work, etc. So this is a real coordinated effort. We don't want people working in silos. We want people working together to take their learning and to bring it together. And then how do we pay for all of this? We have a braided approach to funding. I mean, it is quite, it's a lot of money. It's not cheap to get this training, but we think we want to, front load this first and really, start from a good place. So we use guided pathways funding, Title V grant money. We also lock into professional development and some equity funds. We do tap into other funding sources as well on campus. And I think that's okay. So we have another poll, I believe. And so in your opinion, how important is it to align your guided pathways with your equity goals? And I think Oh, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I don't think we're going to go to the actual poll, but rather just kind of to get you back to reflect on that initial question. But we do have a short amount of time, I believe, where we could maybe field some questions if Eileen had some overall pressing questions that came up in the chat box.
There is one here that just came up that could potentially be addressed. The question is, did you say the retreat is in November, and how do you get people to participate during the semester?
So, yes. So obviously with Zoom, it makes it a little bit easier. This was actually something we planned last spring, but because of COVID and the shutdown of campuses, we weren't able to do it. So we postponed it. How do we get them to participate? We try to make it at times where people can actually participate. And we do give them a lot of notice in advance so that they can make arrangements so that they can participate. Last year, we had almost 100 people register to participate. So it was a huge, a lot of interest. So we were really excited about it.
Yeah, if I can jump in, Ruth, as well. We really didn't have an issue getting people interested. In fact, originally we were going to have it at the UCLA Conference Center, and so we had a maximum of 100 people, and we squeezed in 105. But when we were not able to do it as an overnight retreat, as Ruth said, we've moved it to a virtual retreat, and we have a lot more people than the original 100 who would like to be participating in it. So I think that there's interest and excitement about participating in our equity retreat.
I see more questions than we can probably answer. So is there maybe one more, Eileen, that's kind of jumping out?
Maybe how do you plan to scale this out to other divisions or kind of scale up?
I would love to jump in, and just mention that my conversations with Ruth, as we've really built equity into this, is really that we're at the point of Guided Pathways 3.0. We're right on that edge of, okay, we've done this core work, and I think 3.0 is exactly the answer to that question, that we really want to start making sure that that equity lens is permeating out to the infrastructure, the programs, and in the choices that we make, the decisions we make on a day-to-day basis. And so that's been a huge topic of conversation between Ruth and myself, is exactly that. Now, we've got a lot of buy-in, and I think that it's making that easier to conceptualize of how do you kind of move this out to a larger number of faculty, a larger number of students, and a larger number of programs. But I think that this early work was important in positioning us to be able to effectively do that, because I think our campus really believes in this work and believes in an equity-based approach to doing the work.
And if I can jump in, and I really want to give Lisa and Ruth a tremendous amount of credit, because they have really been driving this initiative. And the data is what opens people's eyes. And so the dashboard that you saw earlier that our institutional research director, Eileen Haddad, and her team put together, that really helps because it allows faculty to go in and really look at their data. It's very hard to make it real when you're looking at overall college data, but when you can start taking it down to the micro level, so you're really looking at your own data and your own discipline, that's when people start getting engaged and feel that they have some power to put an action plan together. And that is also where our peer and data coaches and our completion teams will help. It's not just a few people moving the needle or a few people talking about things, but it gets everyone involved.
So Ned is our help and our support here, and I'm wondering, Ned, if you could advise us on a way that we could, in another place, in another forum, answer the remaining questions that came up in the chat box, because I know we're pretty much out of time. We would be happy to leave emails in the chat box if you think that would work best, for myself and Ruth, perhaps, or if you think that there's a better way, we're certainly open to it.
Email.
Okay. Eileen, would you mind putting, or we can do it, or we could. put our email addresses in there. We would be happy to circle back and answer any questions that you have. If they didn't get answered, we're really short on time and we wish we had the time to do that, but we would love to further those conversations with any of your colleges that have some still burning questions about that model.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure to spend a little bit of time with you this morning, and we encourage you to go to all of the other breakout sessions that are available today and tomorrow. And again, thank you so much for your time.